Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Gurgiolo from the Dialtones. And if you do not know, we are doing a benefit today for Austin Mutual Aid for all of the people affected by the extreme weather and the crashing of the Texas electricity grid. And I'm talking right now with Trevor Wiggins. He was the animator for the Dialtones Young Summer video, which is available today. And the Chronicle did a premiere on it and also highlighted the benefit for Austin Mutual Aid. By the way, anyone listening, watching right now, the GoFundMe link is below in the comments. So if you can, please give. Hi, Trevor. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm happy that I am not in Austin and I've been far away from this tragedy, so I can kind of help out and spread the word about Austin Mutual Aid, who's been doing a really good job in their recovery efforts, and there's still a lot to be done. So I wanted to bring people on that to talk about their experiences, and I know you and your family went through hell, and I don't know if you feel comfortable talking about what happened to y'all.
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind at all.
Thank you. By the way, Trevor, everyone is an amazing animator, and if you go to the Chronicle link, you can see his work in the video. It's so beautiful. So
Yeah,
tell me,
you want me to just kind of jump into what happened?
yeah.
Let's see. So on the 14th, on Valentine's Day, at about it was like dinner time. We were cooking dinner, and the power went out the first time, and we had heard like from some of my wife's like coworkers that there might be rolling blackouts. So we were kind of prepping and getting water and
Mm.
just sort of like thinking maybe it would be like a few hours or we might have some blackouts that night and the temperature was dropping really quickly. And we had like the first outage was like 15 minutes. And so as soon as that was over, we started trying to gather dry goods and, just preparing in case it was longer than we thought.
So it actually went off and back on once for
Yeah,
you?
twice.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're the only one that I've heard that actually had some of the rolling blackouts.
So yeah, well, it kind of rolled over us. I feel like it went off and then about I want to say like 30, 45 minutes went by and then it went off again. And then it didn't happen again until 2 a.m.
Oh.
And I had been, my wife and daughter went to bed and I had been up animating on a project and just sort of trying to get work done in case we lost power the next day.
Mm.
Uh, and it's weird. Like, I feel like the experience I've told like 10 people this exact same thing. I was watching a movie and had gotten my work all kind of tidied up and was about to go to bed. And I went to brush my teeth and I looked in the mirror and the power went out. And it was sort of like,
Spooky.
yeah, and it felt like it was different that time because it was also like it was so long had gone by that it felt like a slightly different feeling or just like it felt like more stressful, I guess. And it was 2 a.m., so it was as cold as it was going to be already.
Mm-hmm.
And that first night, we just tried to sleep like normal, put a few extra blankets on, and it got down to 48 in the house. And then by like
Mm.
midday, it was like 30, between 30 and 35
Yeah.
inside. And so, like, we were basically just huddled in a bed together for that whole day. And it's like a silly thing to think about, but one of the hardest parts of that day is that our daughter is like 4.5, and she was really desperate to play in the snow because she's only seen snow once
Oh,
before.
oh
And I
no.
kept thinking, like, we can't go out because we don't have any way for you to get warm when you come back in, like if she got too cold.
And
So
she
she
couldn't
spent a lot of the day
possibly
crying.
understand that. Gosh.
No, and we were trying to distract her with like watching something on a phone or reading or just about anything we could. And So it was just tough because we're trying to figure out what do we actually need to do. It had already been sleeting for like 2 days, so the roads were pretty slick. And we live in like a really hilly neighborhood. So once you leave our driveway, you're pretty much on like a downhill slope
Yeah.
either way you go. We're like at the base of a hill that both sides of the road go downhill. We're kind of like right in the center of it. And so we were just trying to spend like the whole day trying to convince her like we can't go outside, but when the power comes back on, that's the first thing we'll do. And then it started getting dark, and then at that point it was in the 20s at the house, like inside the house.
Uh,
And at that point, in all of our blankets, our feet were cold. I mean, it was just starting to feel like sort of just dangerous. Like there was no, it just felt like, okay, like we might be in for something a little bit different than what we were expecting. And I'd had hope that the power would turn back on. So we were just kind of waiting. And we ended up getting in like our big bed, and I made a giant blanket for it and like went kind of nuts with it. I put like her chalkboard at the foot of the bed and like clamped it to the bed frame and then attached blankets to that. And I covered our window with a blanket and yoga mats and started stacking her like big books in the window to just sort of insulate.
mm-hmm.
And then we took all of her stuffed animals and lined the whole wall and the window to like create like a little fun border for her, but also soak up some of that heat.
Wow.
And at this point, like the really hard part was that we didn't have a way to really charge our phones. And we knew that we only had, this is like what I've been struggling with the most is that I was personally not prepared enough. We had like a quarter tank of gas, which was our lifeline to like get out and to charge our phones.
Mm.
And, she's scared to death of the dark, like I think most kids her age, but very intensely. So if it goes dark, she immediately starts crying. So
Oh.
then we're trying to figure out how to keep the lights on. I'm searching the whole house for I have this like big Black & Decker flashlight that we don't know where it is. I still have no idea where it ended up. I've had it in the same place for like 3 years. Um, so we had her like little planetary flashlight. It has like slides in it that project like Neptune and Venus, and we
Uh-huh.
ripped the slide out of it, and that was our only flashlight aside from our phones. And so I stuck that in a mason jar and just we were trying to make it fun for her, but it was also scary because we could see our breath and,
Yeah.
it
And you
felt
don't know
just like,
how, yeah, it's like so many unexpected things have been hurled at us. It's like
yeah.
it
Well, and
almost
then
like you start doubting if you know how to judge the situation.
exactly. Like I didn't understand like how dire it was. And it got to the point where I was starting to ration like water and food. Like how much can we, like what can we save that we'll actually keep. Um, and so we tried to make it sort of like normal for her. We made like a little plate of food, and I luckily have some stuff on my computer that she can watch. And, it's not kid stuff. We actually watched the original, not the original, but like the fourth Doctor Who, like the Tom Baker series.
Oh, nice.
And she was like really into that. And then I start seeing my battery dwindle on my computer. And so I'm thinking, well, that light's going to go. And now we just have her flashlight and one set of backup batteries. And so we tried to sleep like that. And it was in the 20s in the house. And she basically cried herself to sleep because we were trying to conserve batteries. And so everything we could do to distract her was just not really enough. And then she literally cried herself to sleep. And I didn't sleep that night. I was so paranoid about everything because we also have our elderly dog. And so I was checking on her and then checking on, my wife and daughter, and just like basically sat awake. And, I kept checking the temperature on our thermostat has a battery readout. And so it doesn't, it's constantly reading in the house. And so I'm looking at that and just watching it incrementally drop. Which just sort of, it like started to feel like a countdown for like when is it going to be too
Uninhabitable
dangerous
for you.
Yeah. And before the sun was even up, I was like starting to pack a bag to at least go sit in the car and like turn it on for some warmth, which is also like, we're not parked in a garage, but I'm just paranoid about carbon monoxide and like sitting in a running car, you know, and there's also snow all around our car. So I don't know how much of the
Just
exhaust is actually escaping.
yeah.
So I was like scraping snow out of the way of the exhaust. And before we got in our car, I tried to go and fill up to at least have some gas as like a lifeline, and couldn't get to the end of our street. And there were actually cars like stuck all along our street because so many people had tried to get out. And at the very end, I started like, I don't know why I'm fixated on this, but there was a car parked at the end that somebody had just demolished. Like they had lost control of their car and just plowed into this thing. And it was at the very end of our street. So I couldn't get gas. So then we just decided we would warm the car up like periodically. And so we spent 18 hours in the car, which I hadn't slept up until that point. And I still didn't sleep. Like I was starting to feel like physically ill because I'd just been awake for so long.
Yeah.
And so we put blankets and pillows and lined the car to kind of keep it warm and insulated. And we would run it for like,
how could you tell what the temperature in the car was?
in the car. So we had like the outside readout, which, you know, at that point, I don't honestly remember what it was, you know, but it was like down to like 9 degrees that night. So, you know, we're in a car. It's not really that much of a difference, but we were all wearing like 4 layers, and we had blankets and coats, and like I, you know, was draping like my leather jacket and stuff on them to just try to insulate. And they could sleep off and on like that, but we're in a car, and it's, you know, there's just not really anywhere. Like our daughter's also really big for her age, so it's, you know, like she's already more than half of my wife's size. So like 3 of us in a relatively small car like that, and the dog. And our dog is not small. She's like a 65-pound, you know, Shiba Chow mix. So like, it was just kind of like starting to feel like I didn't really know what the best option was. And so I started looking at where we might be able to walk. And some people were saying maybe go to a warming center, which like I started having a little bit of an anxiety attack about that because we've been quarantined since March 11th.
I know.
And so
I couldn't even like think about that. I mean, it's like Christopher and I have been super safe
yeah,
with stuff. We have not been going out at all.
Yeah. Well, and I like, I'm not, I mean, it doesn't bother me to say it, but I've been having some health issues over the last few months. And so we're also concerned about what exposure to COVID might do if that could exacerbate what's already going on.
Gotcha.
And so I was having like a full, you know, anxiety attack, and we're just trying to figure out our options. And we had a friend in a 4-wheel drive Jeep bring us some gas, and like they didn't really have a good place to stay either. So everyone sort of just felt like we're all scrambling, like, you know, running out of supplies. And we tried to do another night like that. Like, I mean, we spent the whole day in the car. It got dark, and we spent several hours like that. And I'm just awake watching them, like feeling under their noses and like touching their faces to make sure they're still warm. And I think, like, honestly, one of the hardest parts, like, it got to a point where we were like, we're going to run out of gas. But tomorrow, as soon as the sun is up, I'm going to walk and like, I'll go get a gas can, or I'll try to figure something out. We had contacted all of our friends in the neighborhood to see where they were and if they had like a fireplace or if there was anything like that. And even our friends that were relatively, I mean, it was still like a couple-mile walk. They had a fireplace, but they ended up having to go to a warming center because they couldn't get it warm enough in their house. They were running out of firewood and stuff.
Fireplace? Oh, damn.
Yeah, because they just were running out of fuel. They didn't have anything to burn.
I mean, wood burns so quickly. Like,
yeah. And like, I know a lot of people are burning furniture and all that, but not everyone has like wooden furniture. A lot of people have like IKEA stuff or whatever, and a lot of that laminate wood burns really quickly. Plus, it's burning.
Birdie.
You know, who knows? Yeah, like breathing in chemicals. But so we had that in the back of our mind, And I'm at this point reaching out to everyone I know while I still have phone battery just to see like who has power, and we had found a friend who's like a 17-minute drive normally without inclement weather, who still had power, and he was right behind a hospital. So he kind of felt like he might continue to have power, like that grid might have been prioritized in the blackouts. I skipped over like that night. We were in the car and the porch light turned on. And so my eyes started tearing up and I was like, power, we have power. And so I ran inside and I'd already unplugged everything in the house that wasn't necessary and just made sure our thermostat was set to like 60 so it would just warm up a little bit. And I started just like scrambling to get our daughter's bed set up so we could just kind of give her like a little normal, like a reprieve from everything that had been happening. Because at this point it had been 2.5 days or so since the power went out.
Yeah.
And so I got in, I got her bed all prepped, and then before I got back to the front door, power went out. And then I was like, okay, what should I do? Should we come in case it comes back on? I get in the car, same thing, power comes on, not even 30 seconds, turns back off. So then I just spent the rest of the night staring at the porch light, just waiting for it to turn on, At that point, like my hands were shaking and like my eyes, everything, my face just felt like cold, but my eyes felt like they were just like on fire, because I'd just been awake for so long.
Yeah.
And so we spent the majority of that day in the car as well. I mean, we spent like the night. It's funny because all the time starts to run together. Like power went out on the 14th. We had the whole day inside, the whole day in the car, the whole night in the car. And then that following morning, we started trying to find someone with an all-wheel drive vehicle to help us get out. And we found a place to stay. And he's an old friend, and we were very thankful to have it. But we got there, and he was like, full disclosure, I'm moving tomorrow, like in the middle of a freeze. And so we were like, what do we do? Like, should we... like, can we stay here just to be in the warmth? He's like, totally, but we're going to have people in here moving all my stuff out. And I was sort of saying, like, it's frozen, so I don't know that that's going to happen. And he's like, no, it's fine. The guys that are coming down to help, they'll get it done.
That sounds crazy.
And then I was just kind of like, I was so exhausted that I didn't know how to react to it, and also didn't want to be ungrateful for like the warmth and like getting out of the situation. And it was just, I mean, there's a lot more about that I'd rather not talk about, in a public format, but like,
yeah, this guy was obviously being very empathetic. And yeah,
it was just sort of like, I didn't really know what was going on. And like, after we had tried to sleep, it just felt like, okay, now we're in another stressful situation because we're going to have to get out of here, because there's also a ton of people coming into the house. So like even the room that we were isolating in, there's all these people that are going to come and pack and get stuff out of it.
And if they're movers, that's what they do for their job. So they're in people's houses during the crisis. Yeah.
And I was concerned, because they were coming down from Dallas. So I'm thinking, well, how are they going to do that? Like in the freeze on the highway? And he's like, well, the temperatures will be warm enough. They can drive down if they need to. They can stay the night here. So now we're in this house with all these people we don't know. And like, it's the same panic of the warming center of like, well, what are we supposed to do? And at this point, I don't know how many days it had been really. I mean, we spent, I think, a day, like one night there, and then the following day we made a post, like just asking friends. We had been calling and texting everyone we knew. And our dog was clearly like struggling with it, because she's temperamental anyway. She's older, so that was stressful. And our daughter she's still not fully understanding the situation.
Yeah. Do you think your daughter was she talking about her physical discomfort because of the cold?
She wouldn't tell us when she was cold. And so we
Yeah,
kept asking,
that's
like,
what
are
I'm
your
curious
feet cold?
about. Yeah.
Yeah, like we kept saying, are your feet cold? And she would say, like, no, like really quickly, which we knew, like, okay, let me feel your feet. And then her feet are cold. And so then we're trying to like huddle over her and like breathing on her hands and trying to like warm her up. Um, but also like I mean, I think she's just the age she is. It's sort of lucky and unlucky. She didn't understand the dire situation necessarily, but she knew something was off. And it was
Yeah.
kind of like messing with me because I was clearly stressed. So she would keep like rubbing my arm and like she's seeing that we're stressed. So it's starting to like, I'm wondering, like, is it occurring to her that we're in like a tough situation? Um,
Interesting.
yeah. And so it got to
She's
a point where, yeah, she was
yeah.
trying to comfort both of us because we were just, beyond exhausted. And really, like, the hardest part were those first few days, like the cold nights inside, the 2 cold nights inside, and then the cold, like, day and a half in the car, like that night and that day.
Yeah.
But we were just so beyond exhausted. I feel like I was like not making the best decisions and just trying to like find out what we were going to eat. We were really low on water. So like, I was already dehydrated because I'd been trying to ration water. So I was feeling really like physically ill. Um, and then just randomly, one of our friends from Louisiana called us and said she knew someone with an all-wheel drive vehicle that would either come and get us or come to our house or wherever we were and escort us to a place where we could stay. And so, yeah, and so he drove all the way. And at this point, the temps were like 32 to 35. And so he was like, there's no ice except for a few spots, but if you want, you can follow me. If you go off the road, I'll pull you out of the ditch or whatever. He was just very, like, very generous. And
Wow.
we got there and they were amazing. They were really nice. But then again, they were also like a haven for a lot of people. And so
Mm,
the stress of like,
God. Gee.
just trying to navigate all that. And then the whole time our daughter wanted to play outside and she just couldn't compute. It's too cold if we can't warm up. So that was kind of like the end of that side of the stress for us. And then like sort of the weirdest part is like we were in touch with all of our neighbors on the street, like for about 4 houses on either side of us on both sides of the street. Everyone's kind of texting. And we knew like the neighbor who's kind of catty corner to us, his mother has like life support machines and stuff. I think that she's kind of going through like hospice and that. And so I watched him struggling with like a generator in his driveway for, a day and a half. And that was another thing that like I can't stop thinking about. We had, when the power came on a few nights before, like in the middle of the night, I heard him turn his generator off and he was like yelling, like, thankfully, like, finally we have power. And then they couldn't get their generator to start back up when the power turned back off. And so he
Oh,
was out there for hours just
oh
like trying
no.
to mess with it.
Oh.
Um, but in all of like talking to our neighbors, one of them, they had left without communicating because they had an all-wheel drive vehicle and they were, I think, also in sort of a panic. And so they just took off. And but anyway, when we were out at these people's property, someone said like the map, like the Austin Energy map shows that our outage is fixed, but there's no power on our entire block.
Mm.
And so when we kept
And
checking on
people
it,
already have, and this is when people are getting electricity back in Austin.
yeah, a lot of people, like if you looked at the outage map, our neighborhood was like a Venn diagram of outages. Like it was all down Brody. So like from
Mm.
William, or not William Cannon, but like Ben White, all the way down to Slaughter, all down Brody was a big outage, like this big strip.
Okay.
And then there were two that crossed over it, and where they crossed over was literally our block. And
Mm.
so two of the outages went out. The one down Brody was still, or they went back on. The one down Brody was still out. And then everyone, people were posting, like we're checking like on Nextdoor and Ring and all the neighbor apps. Everyone's posting power back on, no water. And so we're thinking, okay, we'll go check on the house. Still no power. And then by the end of it, it was literally just the 4 streets around our house were the only outage map in that whole area. And so like for an extra like day and a half, our entire little chunk just didn't have power.
How weird.
Uh, it's so strange because it's like I don't. I mean, maybe there was like also a down line or something that added to whatever was happening, but it was just
And
sort of
they had
like,
to get around to, yeah,
yeah. And
and
so
all
they
of
turned the power back on,
this
but then they shut off our water. So like the boil thing didn't even affect us because we didn't.
didn't
There's
have
no
any.
water coming to the house. Um, but at this point, like our faucets weren't dripping anymore. Like even before they shut the water off, so we knew all the pipes were frozen. And I
Mm-hmm.
mean, it had been so cold in the house when I had gone in and checked. Like even middle of the day when it had been warming up, it was still in the mid 20s inside.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, like we kept checking with the neighbors. The water mains had all been turned off, so like nobody had any water flow even to boil their water. Um, and we decided like once that happened we could probably make it work without water, and went back and just realized really quickly like that is really tough with a 4-year old and trying
Yeah.
to find groceries. And at this point we had kind of depleted all of our supplies, and so then at this now we're like, it's a weird thing to like, I still don't really know if it's justified or not, but I for us it's a struggle to go into a store and stuff like that, like double mask and all. It's still just
No, I
the
agree.
anxiety of it. And it
No,
felt like,
we never
like Black
we get
Friday,
our
like five,
groceries delivered or do
same.
curbside
Yeah.
pickup. We don't go
Yeah.
into, yeah, it's like it's not worth it to people with health versus and to our older population, you know. I can wait
Yeah.
until I get vaccinated. And so it's like I that this whole layer to your experience, you know, it's I think important. You know, it's a
Yeah.
you can't. It's like you're in a that place where your body is telling you to react to something, but then your mind's like, hey, you can only react to a certain point because there's this whole other thing that you know that's happening that you got to consider, even though your body's trying to react to this one crisis.
Right.
You know, it's like,
Well, and a lot of people, like, we had asked friends if they had had any luck at stores, and like our neighbors, we're really like, I think lucky in that way that a lot of our neighbors are very sweet and very like we're all checking in on each other, but they were even telling us like no milk at Randall's, no, so we couldn't even get like the basics. So our daughter's like wanting her normal stuff, and we're trying to figure out what we can give her, and it's just wearing on us because we're also like, completely depleted of energy, dehydrated. So it's just like our mental state for making decisions was really just kind of shot, and then on top of the stress, it felt like Black Friday, like shopping, trying to find like water or,
mhm.
just like the basics. And so we ended up driving around to a bunch of different stores, and, luckily people were putting up signs if it was a smaller store, like out of stuff, on the windows. And I think like some people trying to minimize the risk of that, but it just started to feel like maybe we need to figure something out. And even the people we were staying with, they didn't have supplies. And so that's like, we were like on the fence, like, should we go back even though there's no supplies? There is
Mhm.
plumbing, so it's like there's plumbing, but then there's the risk of multiple people all under one roof. And then it's sort of like this, like, which thing can we actually prioritize? Which, like, what's the lesser of the evils? And at that point, like, I still really hadn't slept, like I would nod off and like pass out sitting up and stuff, and like felt unsafe, even driving around just because I felt like my reaction time was so slow.
Mhm.
Um, so it's just weird, and then I started
Being in
talking to like my brother and, different family members, and everyone was really concerned about whether we needed to get out of there and just drive somewhere else now that like the freeze had kind of gone and like some of the areas weren't affected, so we could at least go and stay somewhere safer. But then there's the whole thing, like, for anyone who's as cautious as we've been, it is kind of like a weird, like, where do you go to the bathroom, and where do you do anything on the road, and so it became this sort of like,
it is. I've experienced it. It's weird.
Yeah, and I know, like, and a lot of people think it's ridiculous that we won't just go in somewhere, but a lot of the, like, for me, especially with like the health stuff, it's like, well, going in somewhere might be like the difference in me having like a, you know, an issue that's already happening getting worse. And so I have to be mindful of that. And, you know, it just makes me feel like I just have like general anxiety, just like low level anxiety constantly. And I'm already exhausted. So it was kind of just like a weird, like mental challenge as much as it was a physical challenge to stay safe and to keep everything level and not just be emitting like panic the whole time, you know?
Do you think that
Um,
sometimes, like, knowing that you have a child around, like, you can't express everything that you want to express?
yeah, that it is something that like, and I think I've been thinking about it a lot because, you know, when I was younger and didn't have a kid, a lot of this probably wouldn't have bothered me. You know, I used to camp a lot. Like I feel like I'm like used to
Mhm.
be Mr. Survival or whatever, and then I realized I don't have a tent anymore. I don't have a way to chop up wood if I need it. I don't really have like backup batteries. I don't have like a water purifier. Like all these things that I used to just casually like throw in the back of my car. It's just not there anymore. And so now I'm thinking, okay, well, I don't have those abilities. Now I've also got to keep my like emotional and what I'm putting out level so she's not seeing me in a full panic, you know. And a lot of it, like, it's, I don't, embarrassing is not exactly the right word, but it was sort of just like almost like humiliating because a lot of the time she would ask questions and my eyes would just well up like without any prompt, you know. And it's just like, I don't know how to answer that. And we'll talk about it, you know, like trying to basically push off what her concerns were without letting on to the fact that like, sorry, I've got a browser popping up at random, letting on to like the fact that I'm feeling panicked, you know, and
Uh,
like struggling with the fact that I feel like I've sort of let them down, you know, because I've got, you know, essentially the two of them and the dog relying on me. We're out of dog food, so now it's like, okay, so she's clearly uncomfortable, like, you know, and she's an older dog and she's
mm,
already temperamental and sort of struggling with like the inclement weather. So it's just kind of all these different elements of trying to like spin plates and keep things going and
yeah,
like not just feel like a total failure, which is
yeah,
weird. You know, I didn't think that's what I would be struggling with, but like a
sure.
lot of my inability to sleep since we've been like in a place with power is like laying awake thinking, how am I going to prevent this from happening again? So I have like a list that I've made of like everything I need to never let this affect us, you know, like a tent, backup batteries, like flashlights for her because she's so scared of the dark. I have like this whole list, like we're going to get 20 flashlights and you can just play with them as much as you want because then we have like 35 battery packs and then we're going to get headlamps and we're going to, I'm like buying thermal blankets and all
Yeah,
this stuff. And everyone that I've told that to, they're like, well, the likelihood that this is going to happen again is, you know, pretty slim. But then I start thinking, well, is the Texas power grid going to be regulated all of a sudden? Or are they going to change that? Like, how do we know that it's not going to
yeah.
happen? Like,
How
there's no
are other
certainty.
people going to fix this? And we know the weather's getting more extreme. You
Yeah.
know, so we can only, you know, it's like I don't know if I agree with that. And it's like I don't think that you feeling like you shouldn't put any weight on your shoulders because you obviously reacted amazingly and kept you yourself kept yourself cool, you know, with how you were behaving in front of your child. And it's like your family is safe and is in a place where you get a mental break, which is obvious you needed to. So it's like you've
Yeah.
done, you know, to me, it's like I wouldn't ever want you to feel that weight on your shoulders. But to me, this is a wake up call to me. I do feel like we should be prepared, you know?
Yeah.
I do
Yeah.
think that it's like being in California right now, it's all about the earthquakes and the fires. And um, I don't know. It's just like, it's like it seems it would be a waste to not take it seriously and take something away from this
Yeah.
experience like
When
that.
I feel like also like it's been in the back of my head because when Harvey happened, we moved to Houston 2 weeks before that happened. And so like this is our second major weather event with a small child. And like we were really lucky in Harvey. We were in an apartment building that wasn't affected.
Okay.
There was no damage to our building. Somehow, our street, like there was like basically a river on one end of it, and then if you go like half a mile the other way, there's 4 foot deep water where cars were literally floating by. Like, so we had that. Now I think that's also affecting how I feel like I wasn't prepared because I've been through a major event and still didn't have like cases of water and all these things. I feel like it was in the back of my head, like what a moron that I didn't do something to prevent this again, or like, I don't know. I don't know. It's just a weird thing to
I
be
empathize.
processing.
I empathize with that feeling. I feel like I would feel the same way.
Yeah. But
And,
it's
and that's probably how a lot of people are feeling right now.
Yeah. I think it's also just like recognizing like what damage it's actually doing to people. I mentioned before we got on the live stream that my brother had said that it sounds like I was dealing with like symptoms of PTSD and like it's stuff that he's familiar with. And like I do feel like I'm dwelling on all these things, whether I'm choosing to or not. Like if I lay down and close my eyes, that in my mind is like a list. Like I couldn't sleep
almost like you're
even after we.
of,
Yeah.
of these synapses caught in this like firing off of this thing.
And the first night that we were sleeping somewhere with heat, I laid and I'd been awake for so long that I felt delirious, and everyone kept telling me like go and try to sleep, and so I went and laid down, and I could hear everything happening in the house, and I just couldn't sleep. And when I finally got to like this sort of like twilight phase of sleep, I was literally no, I wouldn't even call it dreaming, but almost going through a list of the supplies we needed, like water, tent, thermal blanket, flashlight, like all of these things. Like everyone needs winter boots. We need, like I'm just, it's weird, I'm like, if I get to a place of quiet, like if there's no music on, or like I've kind of lived with my AirPods in, like since we've had power, because when it gets quiet and settles, I'm thinking of all this stuff just on repeat. What else could I get? What happens if it's in hot weather? At least we can drive. Like, I'm like, it's just like this chaos planning in my brain that I haven't been able to successfully switch off. So it's weird. It's very, I don't know. It's sort of like, I guess not I guess a wake up call of some sort, but not really the one I want, like I think that it's just struggling with like, what level of damage is it? Like, am I being hard on myself? Is everyone feeling like this? Is it a normal thing? Are we like, and that's something else. Like I'm very aware of it, that other people have had a worse time. Like our neighbor who had his mom's medical equipment on a generator, like I can't begin to think what that feels like.
Ugh.
And I still feel just like haggard. I feel like I haven't had enough rest, and that, we're trying to like think, have we been too hard on our daughter, telling her no about stuff? Like, no, we can't throw snowballs. No, we can't do this. And then you see in the news what's happened to people around Texas, like the kid who passed away from playing in the snow. And like, I don't know if you saw that, but I read that headline and thought like, oh man, like this is what I was literally thinking, is like hypothermia and the inability to get warm. And that literally happened to someone. And it's like, how close were we? Am I being dramatic and thinking that? It's just this weird like back and forth of what's reality and what's like overanalyzing, and what's the anxiety, doing to me. Is it, am I thinking too much? Yeah, like where's the line of like how concerned I should be, and was I concerned enough leading into it? Like I'm looking back at like little things I can sort of mark for like where we did well. Like after the very first outage, the really short one, I was like, bake whatever we can. Like, so we were going through all of our dry goods. Like, we have this old cornbread. We could make like banana bread really quickly. And so we had like, I don't know, I felt like because I deal mostly in surrealism and escapism, I equate everything to like fiction. I felt like the hobbits eating like the llamas bread, you know, like it's like the bread that the elves give them, you know. It was like taking a bite and feeling really sad and then wrapping it back up and putting it away and thinking like, I can be hungry for like another 6 to 8 hours and I'm okay, you know. Like it's
Right.
weird, but I can feel my brain like fighting itself to like lean into that surrealism and escapism as well as like being present for them and, you know, trying not to just like pass out from exhaustion. But
Well, that's
it's weird.
probably how you were able to deal with it, which I think is a cool thing that maybe some artists have as in their toolbox of a
Mm-hmm.
way um, to, work with your mind in those situations. I think that's
Yeah.
really beautiful, honestly.
Yeah.
And it's like I think that the trauma of it is real for people that went through much less hard times than you. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like the feelings that you have been echoed with everyone that I've been talking to. And it's like we're musicians and we have Sims and Ham,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like it, that's so comforting because it's like I've used Sims several times, and it's like you have a number and you can have someone that'll hold your hand and help you deal with trauma and issues, and it's like not
Mm-hmm.
everyone has that in Austin, and then, like there's so many other people involved in the music industry that doesn't have that, almost just the simplicity of knowing you can call a number and get
Yeah.
help,
Yeah.
and know what number to call, and
Yeah.
it's like I wish I knew something to tell other people right now, um,
Yeah.
of, of where to
I
go
mean,
for that sort of help.
I've
But
seen resources for it, but something that's like in the back of my mind, just having grown up in Texas and like, you know, like I'm predominantly grew up in West Texas. I think a lot of the mentality is don't let on to the fact that you feel that way. And I think
yeah,
like I never thought that I would feel that way. And I felt it creep up on me really hard. Like I wasn't prepared. This is my fault. I should have been like more protective. I should have been, you know, it's all this stuff when ultimately like I've driven on ice a lot before and multiple vehicles, sometimes with like vans and trailers, and I couldn't get our car to the end of our block safely. You know, it just felt like it didn't matter what I have done because I couldn't do anything right now. You know, like it was almost like my experience leading up to it didn't mean anything, you know, like
wow,
so it's a weird thing of like I wonder how many people won't reach out for that because they're struggling with that same thing, you know? Like I feel like having a kid softened me to admitting like feeling certain stuff like that, whether it's like feeling ashamed or embarrassed of something, like it just made me it like melted away a little bit of that veneer of like not I wouldn't say like toughness. I don't think I've ever been like the, you know, like I can lift more or whatever kind of guy, you know, like I've always been into videos and music, so I've never really leaned into that. But I know so many people just in my immediate circle that would never even begin to talk about the stuff that I've felt, you know. So I wonder if there's like resources for people where, you know, like it's more readily available, like you're saying, for people who aren't musicians that have Sims or Ham or any of that. But I don't know. I feel like it's like a catastrophic thing on a different level. Because even using like Harvey as an example, Harvey wrecked Houston. Like I knew people in East, like downtown area, their homes were underwater. Like my uncle lives in Pearland, and their house was flooded to the second floor. So like they lost all their vehicles. They lost their mother-in-laws. Like she had just moved in with them, and she lost everything she owned, all of their family photos. I mean, it just like altered their life, but it was the majority of it was coastal. It's like Baytown and Houston along that coastline. People in Amarillo were like, what's the big deal? Like, why didn't y'all just leave? You know, and I've been in a couple hurricanes in that area, and people who aren't immediately in that area have no idea what it's like to be stuck there. Like, you can't get a case of water if you want to. Like, there's no outlet for it. So like
Yeah.
something on the scale of like all of Texas losing power to some extent, and I just feel like it's like
There's no.
yeah, like what, there's no precedence for it, like when in like in my living memory, when has there ever been something this like major, and like it's almost weird. It messed with me a little bit because like as temperatures started rising and it was thawing, I was thinking like, was I overreacting about everything? Like, like I know how cold it was, and we know like how close we were to running out of supplies, and it's a weird thing. I felt like when the people came to help us get out to their property, he showed up and there's like slush on the ground, and I felt like I'd been ridiculous for being in a full panic. And he was like, "It's going to be cold again tonight. Like the sun's going down." So it's a weird thing of like, were we overreacting? Were we not reacting enough? It's just like a weird mental game on top of extreme conditions and like no supplies and no helpline, and like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there were a lot of people saying call 911 and they'll come and pick you up and take you somewhere, and the fire department will take you. And it's like, well, yeah, but I don't, like, it's back to what I was saying earlier. Like, what's the COVID concern with that? Like, are the precautions lowered there? It's just too many things all at once to fully process. I feel like honestly, like I will be processing this for a long time. Like I know for a fact it's going to alter, like, even just in our car, I'm going to have all the supplies I need in case we get stuck in the car or if we get stranded somewhere. Like, it's weird. I feel like it'll never leave my brain,
Yeah.
but
It's
I don't know.
amazing how the mind and the body and sleeping, how that all works, and how the mind processes things, so I know that it feels that way now, but it'll feel differently, after every time you sleep and wake up, because it'll change in your body. And I think that you should feel really, really proud of what you're able to do. And I mean, that's all, if I could make you feel that, I would.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's weird. It's a like conflicting energy, I guess. It's hard to know exactly how to feel and how to identify with that stuff. But I don't know. It does make me like, I mean, now we've gone to stay with family in another state to just have like a reprieve from the stress of it, and so I'm gaining a little bit of like perspective, I guess. But it is, I'm seeing like all the effort that's gone into helping people in Texas, and like a lot of the people that we know, like in the music community, are passing out water and trying to get supplies. And I don't know. I hope honestly that it shifts a lot of people's view on like why this happened, and hopefully like on a larger scale, it can be preventable so no one has to feel like that. It's just like, I don't ever want to go through it again. I mean, I feel just like worn down. So it's weird. I mean, I'm like also having to process like, when am I going to start being creative again? Like when am I going to like be able to sit down and like empty my mind to like animate or draw or do anything? It's weird. Like before we left, I was like on the fence, like if I should bring my guitar, and then I'm like thinking like, I don't want to play guitar. Like, am I bringing it just to have it like a safety blanket? I just feel like it's
that a lot.
such a weird effect, but it's a lot. It's very weird. Sorry, I don't know if it was supposed to go this detailed.
Oh man, This to me has just been a real exploratory day of talking with friends and people that I miss about this, and it's just, I don't know, if I feel like if I was there, it would be comforting to hear what people are feeling, so you don't feel alone in these like feelings that are kind of thrust upon you, and we're still, at the end of the day, we're still, all in a pandemic. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I think I appreciate it, and I feel like probably other people do too. So thank you for being okay with talking about it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Um,
Cool.
I I want you guys to come out to California.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to. Yeah, I'm hoping that we can. I feel like it's just like,
Georgia to California.
yeah, I feel like I am done with Texas though. It's weird. I have this like sense of like, is it going to happen again? Like,
Mhm.
I can't trust Texas anymore. The power grid is just freaking me out.
It's really hard to trust the leadership in Texas that, is the cause of these infrastructure cracks. It's really hard to believe that they're going to be the ones to fix it. So,
Mm,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, we just have to hope for better weather, you know? It makes me wonder, like, are we going to have the similar thing when like the like heat of summer comes around? You know, like what is going to tax the power grid? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know.
It
That
got
like
it.
I
It was, I heard that it did go over the highs of summer, the energy consumption, and because it failed, we don't really know how much more would have been drained,
right.
but it was kind of around the height of it in the summertime. If the gas pipes wouldn't have frozen,
Hmm.
I think it would have been, if things were winterized, it probably would have been not so bad,
Yeah.
you know.
I'm also curious just because I don't fully understand a lot of it. Like,
Neither do I.
is there like residual damage? Will it be easier to tax the system after this? You know, like,
Yeah.
or is it something where it bounces back and it's just going to go back to how it was? You know, because I also like thinking about how many like hurricanes we've had. Like, how many more of those things are we going to have? You know, like in the warmer months. Like, it just seems like it's like, you know, the amount, like just in the last handful of years, the amount of hurricanes that we've had and now winter storms, it's just like,
And then, being in this area, it's all about the fires and how dry the ground is and how the fires are catching faster and they are getting more unpredictable in which direction they'll go,
right,
because of the lack of moisture in the ground. So it's like,
right.
it's really hitting all the elements and everyone.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Uh,
interesting. I hope that it like spurs like a lot of people to get like involved in pushing for like a new movement. You know, like if anything, that should be like the biggest silver lining of it is that hopefully it'll mobilize people to get more active and pushing for better energy and, you know, something where there's a little bit more of a safeguard, you know, at the very least, just for Texas specifically, getting back into the federal power grid. Like, I never thought I would be concerned about that. It's such a weird thing to think about, you know, like, you know, and like, honestly, like all the tabs on my phone are like Zillow tabs, like looking at houses in other states. Like, and the first thing I look is like, are they a part of the federal power grid? You know, it's like a weird thing. It's just a headspace I never thought I would be in. And like now I don't know like
moving
when
from a
I'm not
state
going to be in
you
it.
literally don't feel like their infrastructure can provide for your family. That's
Right.
not something you grow up as part of an American, you know,
Yeah.
like, it's like, yeah.
Yeah. It's weird. It makes me think of like my dad's generation always says like it doesn't matter who's president or who's elected because that stuff doesn't affect you. And it's like, yeah, it does. It's very directly affecting us, you know, like I don't know. I wish that there was some way to like show that to people that think that, you know, like I have hope that it'll like spur some change, but at the same time, like I've lived in Texas long enough to know that people are just, you know, they're going to follow those political, you know, lines and all that, you know, like the whole thing about them blaming the turbine or like the wind turbines and stuff like that, you know, it's like, and that's another thing. Like, I think that I won't go off too much about this because I could talk for 2 days about it, but looking at like Twitter and seeing what Greg Abbott's saying and all these people, and they're making it like a political argument while we're literally freezing in our car, like
Yeah.
trying to convince our daughter it's okay that it's, you know, like the moon
Slap.
will be out tonight. So like it won't be as dark. And it's like this guy is complaining about renewable energy, you know, and it's like just unbelievable, you know. It's
Yeah.
a
It's
it's a
like
weird thing.
here are the real consequences to these narratives that people are trying to promote, that climate change isn't happening to us. You know, it's like
Right.
that we're not, if we don't start looking for these things, you know, people die. That's it's so
Mm-hmm.
simple. And it's like, you might think, you know, it seems innocent, this idea of climate denial or whatever. And it's like there are really, really, really real consequences, and it might be you the next time,
Yeah.
you know?
When it feels like so close to home in an odd way, like I saw that one of the people that passed away was an elderly man in Abilene, and that's where I lived. Like, so it's like
That's where
it
my
just
mom
feels,
spent her childhood, in Abilene.
yeah, like that's. So I was south of Abilene in Buffalo Gap, and then I lived in Abilene for a number of years before I moved to Austin. And it's like I'm reading these stories, and I know not only like that town, but you know, I probably know someone that knows that guy. It's no longer just a newsreel and like a distant story. It feels very present because it is like people in Houston, people in Abilene. It's all these places that I'm just more than familiar with. So it just all feels like super close in an odd way. Like I don't know. And that's also like another level of like weird trauma just thinking about that. Like I didn't see the guy's name, but it does make me wonder, is that like one of my friend's grandparents, or is that
Yeah.
someone that I might have worked with at one point? Like it doesn't feel like some distant thing that you see like in another state, or I don't know. I feel like it all just feels so connected,
Yeah.
but it's weird.
I hear
Anyway, I
you.
probably shouldn't drag on too long about it, but
I feel the same way too, because of a lot of my family's in West Texas, and my family
mhm.
is from the coast and West Texas. So I feel like yeah, care about. I mean, Texas is big; it could be like 5 states,
Yeah,
and we're both kind of spread out in our influences with it. So I know what you're talking
yeah,
about.
yeah,
So much, Trevor. I wish I could give you a big hug
yeah.
and
Same.
family. Um, Thank you so much for talking, and thank you so much for the beautiful video you made for the
Of
Dialtones.
course, of course.
And people, if you look down below, you see a link to a GoFundMe for Austin Mutual Aid, and we appreciate anything that you can give. Okay,
Cool.
I'm going to sign us out. You can stay on, Trevor, and we can say bye. Thank
Okay.
you. Bye, guys.